Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network podcast with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, grab a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN.
To the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming to you on all of your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's show, we will be talking about Chapter 1 from The Philosopher's Stone, The Boy Who Lived. So, Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. I mean, what a perfect way to start the book. I mean, what was your thoughts initially of the first chapter?
Oh God, I mean, it was where it all began. Obviously, but it's like a welcome home. It really is. It's just like a little warm hug whenever you read them.
Yeah, those first lines, you know instantly what you're getting, and it's just, I think after you've read it a few times, that you just know when you're starting that book how kind of you're not thrown into it necessarily, but you're kind of guided into it.
Yeah, it's sort of kind of like a gradual welcome into the Wizarding World. It's sort of like very much a stark contrast. Yeah, it is. It's very much like a warm introduction to the Wizarding World. And it just fills me with joy every single time that I read it. And as cheesy as it sounds, I absolutely do love it.
I mean, for me, like, the chapter itself, it was ingenious to start the book, and actually it doesn't even mention anything about the Wizarding World.
Yeah.
It comes straight in from a Muggle perspective. And I mean, for me, the fact that the half the chapter is just showcasing how the Muggle world is just dull as dishwater.
Yeah.
Like, it's so mundane.
Yeah, and you do get that stark contrast of how exciting and almost glamorous the Wizarding World actually is. Because if you sort of read the chapter all the way through, it's almost like you get Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia and Dudley going about their standard run-of-the-mill desperate housewife lives. Surrey, suburb. Anybody and their granny could have done that. But then when you see all the characters from the Wizarding World merging in, because that's all you really see, it's just little snippets of them. They just merge in. And it's only a couple of snippets of conversation that Uncle Vernon will hear. It's little comments made on the news. But you can already see how such a stark contrast it is between the two worlds. And that's what I love about that chapter, is the fact that you're able just to sort of see what lies ahead, and it makes you want more. It really does make you want to read on.
I think that's the beauty of the chapter itself. I mean, to start it with something that's called The Boy Who Lived automatically grabs your attention because you want to know what's going on.
Yeah, who lived, who died,
exactly, what happened in the first place. And it just starts so blasé.
Yeah.
And the fact that things are happening around Vernon as he's walking to work, and actually he's not even paying that much attention to it. But you as a reader really wants to you want to know what's happened.
Yeah.
But you're not getting any information besides the odd conversation. And the book really tries to drive home the fact that Vernon is just not interested.
Yeah, he's not interested in anything apart from his basic suburban quote-unquote normal life. And that's it. And
literally, like, he could be anyone at this point because he is so mundane, so cookie-cutter.
Yes.
That you don't really know kind of who this person is, what's his link to the story, and why are we following him in the first place.
Yeah, there's no excitement. It's, if you're not part of the ordinary, then you're not worth him knowing. He does not want to associate with you. And by extension, neither would Aunt Petunia, neither would Dudley.
No. And the thing is, I think the way that they are all kind of described, and it's just that whole boring, generic family at this point, that it just makes them sound so boring. And when you then start getting all the magic happen, it seems even more magical because you've been introduced to this kind of boring, mundane, everyday kind of people.
Yeah, it's like a bit of comic, a bit of light relief from the mundane. And as you sort of go through the book and through the rest of the chapter, you get more and more snippets of magic coming through, and that makes you want to read on. It makes you want to know what is happening in this other world that we don't know anything about yet. And then all of a sudden we get this cat with glasses obviously transform into Professor McGonagall, and we're like, hold on, who's this queen?
Exactly.
And then you get this half-mooned, bespeckled octogenarian turning out lampposts with a Pez dispenser. And you're sort of like, who's this?
Yeah, exactly. If we kind of look at the descriptions of all of the characters and the fact that you get this almost Roald Dahl-esque description of Aunt Petunia and Vernon to begin with. You've got this stick figure of a woman with a really long neck and this plump, short man and this, well, essentially ugly baby.
Yeah.
That's a mini version of Vernon at this point.
Yeah.
It doesn't fill you with any kind of joy because you're so, I think as someone who's grew up reading and actually being introduced to Roald Dahl books, having those kind of descriptions, you automatically know when you have a description like that, they're not going to be good characters.
Yeah, it's like you're automatically, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
It's like that's already set the groundwork for you. You know what you're getting, and you know that you're not going to like these people. You're not meant to like these people.
Yeah.
How did you first start reading the books?
So I ended up reading the Deathly Hallows first, and that was actually really late into it because the 6th film had already come out.
And I assume that you'd seen all the films before you read Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, so I had, the only one that I hadn't watched was the Deathly Hallows because that still hadn't come out in cinemas at the time.
Right, okay.
So I was trying to pre-read Deathly Hallows. But otherwise, I hadn't really read any of the other books besides maybe, I think, one of the first few of them. My mum read to me as a kid as like bedtime stories. But I was kind of at that age where you were just kind of being read to. You weren't really paying attention to what was being said. So nothing was really going in. And yeah, so the first one that I ended up reading was The Deathly Hallows. And then it wasn't until later on that I then decided to actually revisit and reread all of them in one go.
Right, okay. So did you do Deathly Hallows and then Philosopher's Stone all the way through to Deathly Hallows again?
Yeah. So I kind of went full circle and went back and read them all in one go. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, so I was a bit strange the way that I sort of started because I remember getting The Chamber of Secrets as the first book. And for some reason, coming onto Philosopher's Stone, I remember getting it from this rundown, tattered old bookshop from the town that I live in, which is probably a charity shop now because that's all that is in that now. It's just charity shops.
Everything's just a charity shop.
Pretty much. It's the absolute pits now. But I remember getting the book and writing my name on it, my class in school, and my mum's mobile phone number, which for some reason I really don't know why I did that. And at the age of, I want to say 8, I can remember that and recite it off the top of my head verbatim. And I really don't know why I felt the need to deface it in one of the first edition Harry Potter books.
Well, I mean,
I don't think it was first edition right enough, but the first cover.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Sotheby's here, but it's...
well, it's definitely not worth a lot now. It's got writing all over it.
Yeah.
But I suppose you wanted an identity card, I suppose?
I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose so.
If you ever got lost and you could just wave the Philosopher's Stone around and just be like, help.
Yeah, probably put me in care.
I mean, the introduction that we ended up getting and actually the contrast that we end up seeing from the Muggle side of the world, and then suddenly we get introduced to these characters who are essentially larger-than-life characters. So you get Dumbledore strutting his stuff, using his Pez dispenser, McGonagall doing a phenomenal transformation, and then Hagrid making the entrance of all entrances. I mean, if you're going to do an entrance, go big or go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Riding in on a motorbike, blasting down into a small, quiet Surrey suburb.
Yeah.
At God knows what time in the morning. I can already hear the notifications from next door pinging off at this point.
Yeah, and let's unpack this a little bit. So, Given the description that we got of, Little Whinging, that very nice, as you say, cookie cutter, muggle suburb, curtain twitchers everywhere.
Yeah.
Aunt Petunia's giraffe-like neck over the garden hedges looking out at everything. You cannot tell me, you simply cannot tell me that one person in that whole street, that whole suburb, that borough of Surrey, did not see a 7.5-foot giant riding a motorbike.
Well, exactly.
Into that.
Harry and Ron had enough trouble flying a car that went invisible.
I know. And they were seen by no less than 7 muggles.
Exactly. And yet, a motorbike with a giant that wasn't even invisible, that burns holes through clouds.
Greta Thunberg is trembling.
If she was alive at that point.
Oh, God, yeah.
Riots in the streets.
Riots. Surrey riots.
But essentially, how could anyone have missed that?
Well, exactly, that's the thing. It just doesn't really make that much sense to me. But not unless if Professor Dumbledore knew that Hagrid was going to get Harry. He did some kind of magic on that, but that's a question for another day.
He twiddled his fingers, did a bit of jiggery-pokery.
Who can say? I would like to think anyway.
Well, he seems to know everything before anyone else does, so you would expect that he had some sort of plan. He knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, he certainly did, yeah.
I think, actually, the whole kind of introduction to the main set of characters, you end up getting this kind of weird dual family that gets presented to you within this chapter. So you've got the kind of boring, not very nice family that he ends up getting put with, being the Dursleys.
Yeah.
And these kooky characters that you end up seeing, who actually end up becoming quite profound figures within Harry's life throughout all of the rest of the books. And actually they become almost parent figures themselves.
Yeah.
Which is really strange. And actually, you even get a hint of Sirius Black within this chapter, which sounds like a throwaway comment, but actually you don't realise until later on in the books that actually how much of an impact Sirius Black has and how much of a father figure he's going to be.
Oh God, yeah, definitely. I mean, one of probably the most influential characters that Harry would have had, because realistically he is the closest thing that he ever did have to family, as in family that loved him. Albeit Sirius being a godparent, but still he was the one who sort of knew exactly what his mother and father were like on quite a personal level. And I imagine that had he had the chance, he would have raised him the way that they would have wanted him to. But it's ingenious planning when you think about it, how you end up having that singular throwaway comment of Sirius Black's motorbike, mentioned once in that first chapter, and then to become a villain for the majority of the Prisoner of Azkaban, and then for the past few chapters of it, all of a sudden becoming the hero.
Yeah.
And then playing such a huge part on Harry's life the whole way up until, well, the end of the series. Right with him up until the very end.
I mean, do you think that was intentional to put that into the books at this early stage? Do you think that actually there was a plan behind doing that mention?
I honestly don't know, but if there was, that was very clever. It's very clever.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people say she ate and left no crumbs, but she left crumbs.
Oh, 100%.
The whole way throughout that book series.
Absolutely.
The whole way.
The whole thing leading up to the last book is just breadcrumbs.
And it's ingenious.
Yeah.
Like, even going back now to read it as an adult, compared to when I read it as a child, every single time I read these books, I pick up something completely different.
Yeah. Completely
different interpretations of things. My imagination just does tend to run wild, but I'm astounded every single time I read them. Every single time.
And I think that's the nice thing about the books, is actually it's one of those series that actually you can then go back and reread and get something different from it, because you're rereading it with foreknowledge of what happens later on.
Yeah.
And actually you are then picking up on those kind of subtle hints, those cues that you didn't pick up on before.
Yeah.
And likewise, there's stuff that then didn't ever get translated into the film. So actually, when I was then going back and rereading the series, having obviously watched the majority of it at that point, rereading the series, there's stuff that does then get overlooked and doesn't then get translated into the films. So
Yeah.
you kind of end up using your own imagination anyway. So yes, you might have a scene where it's McGonagall and you've got Maggie Smith in your head, but the way they interact and the way that they're described so vividly in the books, you still get a bit of a mental image when you're actually reading the books.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever reread it and not, like you, I've not picked anything extra up. There's
Yes.
always been that subtle thing that I've never particularly noticed before, or a very small detail that I just forgot was mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I reread this and the fact that Hagrid says that he borrowed the bike from a young Sirius Black, like, I always forget that he mentions it there. I always forget that there is that little subtle hint of Sirius Black, a main character, being mentioned at this point, and then nothing mentioned until Prisoner of Azkaban.
Nothing at all. No.
So just those little gems and those little details, just, it's what makes some of the chapters just stand out for me.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying, how you said about a young Sirius Black, because I think the thing that I often forget is at the time when Harry's mum and dad died, they were, 20, 21?
Yeah.
So Sirius Black would have been the same age. We are older than them. And I feel ancient at the thought of that. I'm just putting that out there.
It does make me feel really old now, looking back at it. That this all kind of starts at a point where everyone's kind of our age or younger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's horror. Yeah. Absolute sheer horror.
We're just going to sign out now. Just.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. But yeah, it's was there any standout parts in that chapter for you?
Overall, I think it was that contrast of going from Vernon walking to work, something really boring and mundane, to that switch into the wizarding world and actually being introduced to so many kind of different magical elements. So obviously you've got like the Deluminator, you've got McGonagall being Animagus, you've got a flying motorbike, you've got giants. There's just so much kind of going on in that short space of time.
Yeah.
That's probably the standout for me.
Yeah, and there's a lot to take in. And it's not... it's a lot to take in all at once.
Yeah, but it's done so well and it's done so gradually that you don't feel
overwhelmed.
I mean, what about you with your kind of standouts?
I think for me, it's just the introduction of arguably some of the most powerful and influential characters in Harry's life. Don't get me wrong, for good and bad reasons. So obviously you've got the Dursleys, and I mean, we'll come on to them at a later time. I'll talk about them in a bit more detail. However, when it comes to Dumbledore, McGonagall, Hagrid and Sirius Black, 4 characters introduced in that first chapter, 4 characters who were pivotal in Harry's development, in his upbringing, and in his development as a character. They were essentially the family that he never had. Because Dumbledore, albeit arguably for whatever reasons you may want to discuss, he guided him along the path for greater good, albeit without him knowing.
Yeah.
McGonagall looking after him every which way she possibly could, right up until the Battle of Hogwarts, right at the very end. Hagrid, who was like the father he never had.
Yeah.
Because he is like that father figure. Always wanted to do everything right by him. Always picking him up when he was down.
Yeah.
Never making him feel upset. Just always there for him.
That's very true, actually. I mean, Hagrid's one of those characters where no matter kind of what happens, he seems to have this impeccable timing to just show up and be there during the story when they're just at their lowest.
Yeah.
And just find some way to change their mindset of actually being defeated to, no, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, there is a way around it. You guys can figure it out because you guys are smart, you guys are switched on, you can do it.
And see, for me, Hagrid has always been like a little bit of a beacon of hope throughout the whole series, because when you think about it, his mother, don't know if she's still in the giant colonies, may or may not be dead, who can say. Father died quite young, expelled from Hogwarts, got brought back on as a gamekeeper, and even though he knew he did nothing wrong, he forgoed his magical education. But stayed on at Hogwarts and never, ever complained
Yeah.
about anything. And went off, collected Harry from that burning house in Godric's Hollow, seen James and Lily's bodies. I mean, that must have had a huge impact on him. Maybe that's why he looked after Harry so much.
Yeah, having known kind of like what he's come from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think actually we tend to end up forgetting how much that group of people were interlinked, first of all, with the original order. And actually, Hagrid was a huge part of that and actually was included in the order.
Yeah.
In the first place. So actually, he was very well connected with both James and Lily to begin with. So actually, he was losing someone who was quite close to them.
I mean, arguably, he probably had them at school when they were pupils. So, I mean, that must have been awful for him.
Yeah.
As much as it would have been for Dumbledore or McGonagall to see their, ex-pupils sort of, die. But for Hagrid to then go and see their burnt bodies, well, dead, probably burnt, and then to go and pick up their only child who was the survivor of that attack, and then to literally look after him the whole way throughout the books.
Yeah.
The way that Snape should have done. I've got a lot to say about that.
So in terms of, so your favourite character, Minerva McGonagall.
Ah, Queen!
What do you make of her entrance? So we've talked about Hagrid having the entrance of all entrances. Minerva being a very top second.
Well, I mean, arguably top second. If we're going to go by entrances, then yes, fine, Hagrid came in on a flaming motorbike. However, Minerva McGonagall, right? Tartan-clad goddess. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. Amazing witch. Able to master human transformation, which is undoubtedly an extremely difficult skill.
Yep.
I say that as if I can do it. But from what I have read. And she is essentially Dumbledore's right-hand woman. She's always there, and she is like a lawful good.
Yeah. Oh, she is definitely like a lawful good character.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. She's that...
She never really wants to take any risks. She always wants to do everything correct.
Yeah.
And what is right by the pupils and what is right in the world.
Yeah.
I think that's why I like her so much.
I think that's kind of reflected in the fact that she is that teacher that would tell you off, but you knew it was coming from a place of they want you to do better.
Yes.
And it's not them being harsh necessarily, but even if what they're saying is harsh.
Yeah.
The way they come across is that kind of nurturing side.
Yeah.
That kind of, like we've said about these characters being almost like a second family, she is that kind of, I don't really want to say mum character, but kind of a mother figure.
A mother figure. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going by mother figures, Molly Weasley, quintessential, hands down. McGonagall, though, she's a bit of a mystery in terms of that. She is just... She knows what's right. She knows what has to be done. She knows what you should be doing, and she will guide you to do that.
Yeah. But the thing is, she's not afraid to break the rules either.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, she's then Harry's almost cheerleader when things are going badly.
Yeah.
She's there supporting him, even though it's breaking the rules.
Yeah.
So even though she's like this lawful good character, she knows when to break certain rules because she knows the rules that should be flexible.
But she is very pragmatic. She's very pragmatic in her approach. And she can't really do everything black and white. You need to sort of be sensible.
Yeah. Well, she is a tabby cat after all. She's not going to be black and white.
Well, definitely. Definitely not.
And then looking at then obviously the third character that we end up getting introduced to, being Dumbledore. I mean, for someone who's meant to be this kind of larger than life character, knows everything before anyone else does, is on step 10 before anyone's on step 2, for him to kind of walk in to the scene and you don't even... Obviously, when you read the books, you get to know that actually he was apparating in and he just appeared on the street. But for something so mundane and boring in contrast to the other two,
Yeah.
walking in, who wasn't there a minute ago, and just clicking seemingly a Pez dispenser and taking out all the lights, I just wanted a bit more.
Yeah. I get that. And I know what you were saying in terms of he is the man who's on step 10 when, as you're saying, everybody else is on step 2. It's sort of... In that scene, you can almost understand because Hagrid and Professor McGonagall are very much shaken up at the fact that, you know, Voldemort has apparently died, banished. James and Lily are dead. You know, it's two major things that's rocked the Wizarding world. Dumbledore, though, he's probably planned that. I say planned that, he's not planned their death, but he has foreseen what should be happening or what will be happening. Maybe that's why he's so laid back and almost lackadaisical about it.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think it's that foreknowledge that he has of this is what kickstarts Voldemort's demise, because obviously McGonagall asks, like, is that the end? Has he died? Has he gone forever? And even then, Dumbledore's just like, well, we can't really say for now.
Yeah.
Like, he knows that something's going on.
Yeah.
He knows that at some point Voldemort's going to come back.
But he doesn't know exactly what will bring him back.
No.
Because, I mean, Horcruxes were never... They may have crossed his mind, but he didn't know, I don't think, until the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry brought him the diary.
Yeah.
Then that's maybe when the cogs were starting to turn a bit quicker. But he must have known that he was coming back. Yeah. How? He didn't know.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Voldemort, he prided himself on being the Dark Wizard to push the boundaries of magic. But did Dumbledore know what he did?
Yeah.
Who can say?
Yeah, exactly. But I think the bit that kind of almost gripes me with the character that we see with Dumbledore at the beginning of the books is it's not like the character we get to see and develop throughout the books. He's just this very eccentric, kooky character, and he just says things that just are too eccentric for me. Like, the whole thing of him having a scar on his knee that's the shape of the London Underground.
Yeah.
I mean, funny, light-hearted kind of throwaway comment to kind of lighten the situation. But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, it's not... For me, it doesn't feel like it's right for his character.
What I want to know is, how did he get that scar? And did it include the Elizabeth line? Well, exactly. Now he's dead, but I imagine.
Exactly. Did it include the Elizabeth line? Was he that foreshadowed that he knew that was going to be there?
Who can say?
Exactly. But I suppose probably the way that he got it was he had a fall, because he must be at the age where he's having a fall.
Yeah. A lot.
Yeah.
But saying that, did he? I mean, think about Goblet of Fire. When he does that whole rushing down in the film, saying, Harry, did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire?
We're not going to go there.
Yeah, we're not going to go there, because it was neither Camley. But that man sprinted down those stairs.
Well, he gets enough exercise. I mean, where his office is, like, he's pro at going up and down stairs at this point.
God, yeah.
Like, the whole staircase just to get to his office front door, and then more stairs.
Yeah.
Like, he's not adverse to hiking.
He certainly isn't. I mean, I would have thought at some point, I mean, when you think about the amount of, I don't want to say geriatric professors in that castle, you would have thought at some point a Stana stair lift would have been brought in.
Exactly. Could you imagine the contract price on that?
Well, I know. I mean, how many staircases are we talking? 142 on the grand staircase. What else have we got here? I mean, that's a lot of money.
Exactly.
Stana stair lift would be breaking the bank with those galleons.
Exactly. I mean, look at what they've got for security in terms of Filch. I mean...
Yeah, right. That, I feel, is a bit bullying, because considering the fact that poor man is a squib, and he is the only person employed to clean a castle without magic.
100%. Like the scene in Deathly Hallows where he's there sweeping the floor after the battle, I could not cry for a person more.
Even though he's a bit of an idiot.
Just a tad. But when you're surrounded by people who have magic, who could easily just wave a wand and do your job in a few seconds.
Exactly.
It is a bit of rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah. It's a bit crap.
Just a tad.
Poor man.
So, I mean, what was your overall thoughts on the first chapter?
I mean, I loved it. I mean, I really did, because, as I say, every time I read the books, or when I restart reading the series, it's like a welcome home. Like that Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of Number 4 Privet Drive, it's like a welcome mat. As soon as you read that, you've stepped over the threshold and you're about to enter this world of magic. You just know what's going to come.
Yeah.
And you just can't beat it.
No, it's true.
You really can't. I mean, it might not be the most action-heavy of the chapters, but it just feels like home.
I think...
As cheesy as it sounds.
It does, but at the same time, it is so accurate. It's such a nice kind of introduction to what's happening, what's happened, and just gradually introducing you to what is going to happen and not throwing you like at the deep end.
Yeah.
But weirdly, the chapter almost feels like it has thrown you in at the deep end because you're coming halfway through a story.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's almost the enticement of wanting to know what else is going on.
Exactly.
So how do you think, in terms of then bringing the books to movies,
yeah,
do you think they did a good job?
I mean, I do think they did a good job. I mean, the Harry Potter films, all 8 of them, you cannot fault them. There's nothing wrong with them. For me, they are unmatched. But you could always add more stuff from the books in. I mean, I am here all day, every day for a bit by bit, blow by blow retelling of the books in movie form. But we could be here for 500,000 hours. And I'm fine with that.
Oh yeah, I'm completely here for I can read the book as I'm watching marathon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Warner Brothers would be there for it, though.
Maybe not.
HBO might.
Maybe HBO.
Possibly. But I really do wish that we had seen more snippets of the Wizarding World in that element of the film. Because albeit you had McGonagall, Hagrid, Dumbledore all coming in, you didn't have the eccentric wizards that Uncle Vernon's seen walking about who he thought were students just doing like a charity stunt. You know, the fashion, those robes, the hats.
Yeah.
All of these things would have been fab to include in the film.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, like they had all of these kind of costumes on, and the level of detail that they go into with actually describing what people are wearing, and obviously Vernon's got his blinkers on, but there was so much detail to go into of what wizards should be wearing, and you got none of it.
Yeah. There was nothing.
And like even going into like the later films, it gets almost less and less and less. So you start off with the Philosopher's Stone, and you actually get to see kind of what kind of wizards wear, and you get this introduction to what they look like wearing the hats and everything in Diagon Alley. But after that, it kind of just whittles down, and the only people wearing kind of this fancy get-up are the teachers.
Yes. And it becomes more evident, I think, certainly for when you watch Philosopher's Stone, you see the Diagon Alley scene. Everyone's wearing hats. Like with God only knows what amount of animal parts in these hats. But when you think about Half-Blood Prince, when you get to Diagon Alley, everyone who's in Fred and George's shop or walking down the deserted Diagon Alley, it literally looks like Oxford Street.
Yeah.
Everyone's just wearing the same clothes.
Yeah, like charity patched work kind of suits, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no robes, no hats, no kind of fanciness. And I get it's almost like... I get the contrast that they were going for in terms of like an aesthetic, that it is a bit more kind of wartime, people are kind of making do with what they can get hold of kind of vibes.
Yeah.
But you still have to retain that kind of element of like, this is what a wizard looks like.
Yeah.
And from going from like the books, and actually obviously you get kind of an idea of what wizards look like, because on the back you have this Dumbledore character wearing astrology covered robes,
Yep.
almost what looks like a rhubarb and custard crumble outfit,
Yep.
and you then get none of that translated.
No, you get none of that. Absolutely none of that. Which is a shame. That would probably be one of my only criticisms of the films, is the costumes. Or lack of, I should say.
I mean, not to say that the costumes are bad.
Oh my god, no. I mean, they're wonderful.
The level of detail that goes into some of them, and just like the subtleties of that person's characteristics
Yes.
in their costumes.
Yes.
But there's no flair.
No pizzazz.
And I think that whole thing of going from like young Dumbledore to this Dumbledore that we're seeing from Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, I mean, he went from wearing like tweed suits almost, very well groomed, and a very articulate professor, Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher, to then moving on to, for example, Chamber of Secrets, when we see Tom Riddle's diary. That was only a few years after Fantastic Beasts. Already he's aged about 20 years.
Yeah.
He's put on that massive beard. He's got on this silk robe almost, swanning about the castle.
Midlife crisis, definitely.
Literally, yeah. I think the duel with Grindelwald hit him hard.
Yeah.
And then after that, you get to 1991 for Philosopher's Stone, and he's still the same, wearing those long silk robes, that little bonnet, looking old.
Yeah.
But then, as the books go on, he's supposed to look a lot more fierce and ravaging, which I suppose he does, but with Michael Gambon coming in, which is good, I suppose.
I mean, like, looking at, obviously, actors aside, because obviously what happened with
Richard
Harris unfortunately couldn't be avoided.
No, God, no, absolutely not. But part of me does think Richard Harris was a great Dumbledore. But it was like your granda.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like wise, full of wisdom. I couldn't imagine him doing the battle at the Ministry of Magic with Voldemort.
Oh, no.
I just couldn't do that. I could not foresee that.
No.
I couldn't imagine him wielding the Elder Wand. I just couldn't.
No, I completely get that. It's definitely one of those character choices where actually it worked out nicely with what happened.
Yeah.
In the nicest way possible. But I just wish that it hadn't had that swap. I have a real gripe with movies when they change out actors.
Yeah.
And I have the same problem with Crimes of Grindelwald, with changing out actors, but for no kind of story reason.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to change out characters, make it that there was a time gap and actually everyone looks a bit older or everyone's kind of changed. Change up a few different people.
Yeah.
Not just have one character where we're like, oh no, this is definitely the same person. It's not, but it is.
Because I remember going to the cinema and seeing The Prisoner of Azkaban. And for some reason, well, I know I was very young at the time, but for some reason it just did not compute in my mind that because Richard Harris had died, he wouldn't be in the rest of the films.
Yeah.
And then when I seen Michael Gambon come up doing the whole welcome to another year at Hogwarts type thing, I was like, who's this man? But then all of a sudden this gentle, paternal character towards Harry all of a sudden turned into this fierce leader.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a drastic character change.
I definitely think that actually the Richard Harris that we got in the first film, it just worked so well with what we were expecting from the description. And it was definitely the right choice. I think what they did with the casting was on point. But to then not have them necessarily look how they looked from the descriptions of the books. And is it really Dumbledore on the back of the books?
Well, funny you're saying that, because I was under the impression it actually was. And then I had to look this up earlier on because I did wonder why he looked so different. So, on the back of the original Bloomsbury cover by Thomas Taylor, everyone seemed to think this young wizard having the spell book and the pipe was a young Albus Dumbledore, or who it was supposed to be before the films were released. But as it turns out, he was actually commissioned just to paint a wizard to decorate the back cover. So he did that, but just generically, but in the likeness of his father.
No.
Yeah. So most fans apparently tended to presume that it was a younger Dumbledore or even Professor Quirrell or Nicholas Flamel, because if you look on the illustration, there's like a bulge in his pocket and it's supposed to be the Philosopher's Stone.
Right.
But on Thomas Taylor's blog, this wizard is referred to as Wizzy, whoever he may be. But that was just a quick choice for a file name, so there was no thought behind that.
Yeah.
So an Argentinian fan called Alfonso Ferrer asked him, and he said, yes, he was only ever intended to be a generic wizard to decorate the back cover, so he never needed a name. If he really needs one now, let him be known as Robertus Tallis.
Well, congratulations, Robertus. You managed to get onto the majority of covers of the Philosopher's Stone.
Well done. But yeah, when I found that out, I was genuinely shook.
I am quite amazed that I've generally always thought it's always been a Dumbledore
Because
character.
I suppose when you look at it just now, you can almost see a bit of Jude Law.
Exactly.
I thought that's where they were going.
Yeah, that's where they kind of got that inspiration for like how he's going to look as a young Dumbledore. I generally thought like that was a Dumbledore character.
Yeah.
But saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if that actually is the reference point that they've taken
Gone with.
Yeah.
And do you know, I think the casting for Dumbledore in Fantastic Beasts was fab. I really do. I think Jude Law played him phenomenally. Oh.
Yeah, controversial.
Oh, carry on.
I know. I think I just have a bit of a problem with like having someone who, like Eddie Redmayne, who is a massive fan, has read all the books, and then to have someone like Jude Law come in, who is Dumbledore, this larger-than-life character, this all-knowing person, and be quizzed in interviews and not know a single spell from the Harry Potter series, hasn't done seemingly any kind of research.
But arguably, counterpoint, I have seen interviews with some actors and they have said, for example, I think it was Charles Dance, he played Justice Wargrave in the Agatha Christie adaptation of And Then There Were None. And I believe he didn't read the book beforehand because he wanted to read the screenplay and take what they wanted for that.
Yeah.
As opposed to basing himself on the character from the book.
But
which I can understand.
I can get that in terms of like if it's the very first kind of movie adaptation of it, but for something where it's had a movie adaptation, it's been out for years beforehand, because it wasn't like...
No, it's not a new thing.
Dumbledore came out like after Harry Potter had just finished. It was at least kind of...
Well, he did come out after Harry Potter just finished, but that's another story.
But there was a decent amount of time gap where he must have had nieces, nephews, someone related watching it and would have seen it at some point. Like, I don't know how you would have gone that long without having seen it somewhere. And to not know anything for a character, it just kind of annoyed me slightly of having such a big role.
Yeah, I suppose, fair enough, yeah.
So that's more my controversial opinion on Jude Law playing Dumbledore. Granted, him playing him, amazing acting, and actually did do it justice.
Yes.
But it just rubbed me up the wrong way with seeing him in interviews being quizzed about Harry Potter, just not knowing anything.
Yeah.
Sitting next to Eddie Redmayne, being like a Hermione person, having his hand up, answering all of the questions.
Yeah.
I just wanted a bit more from him.
A bit more knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Do you then think that the movie did the chapter justice?
I think it did. I think it included all the key points. It would have been nice, I would say, to see a bit more of Uncle Vernon's daily grind. you know, going to work, seeing how just mundane that life is,
Yeah.
to then see the complete contrast of how magic everything was going to be for Harry.
Rather than just having a briefcase, kissing goodbye and shooing owls off of his car.
Exactly. I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, the actors did them justice.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think they did them absolute justice, but I just wish there had been a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think, though, that might be a recurring theme for this question if I ever get asked it again, because do you think the chapter did it justice? Yes, but they could have included this sentence from that character.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah. I think would be very similar to mine in terms of, I think when they were then obviously adapting it, they didn't want to necessarily include everything because it's the first film that they were doing. It was a bit of a gamble. But at the same time, the books hadn't been fully finished yet.
Yeah.
So it was almost kind of like, which bits do we cut? Can we get rid of this? Can we get rid of this? Do we need to keep this? No one really knew.
Yeah.
So the whole kind of line of having Sirius Black mentioned, they didn't really know that was going to need to be in there.
Yeah.
Later on, because it actually reflects as a kind of an arc.
Yes. With you.
I think for me, that's probably going to be like the most recurring thing from a movie adaptation is actually all of these little breadcrumbs that we got during the chapters that just get missed out.
Yeah.
And you don't get that level of breadcrumb, level of detail in the films that you do in the book.
But arguably, that's what makes reading the books so much more fun. Because if you're sort of reading a bit by bit, blow by blow account of what's happening in the films, you'll be like, why bother read the books? There's always something more for you to see in the books.
Yeah.
You can envision it a lot more. You can put your own spin on things. Because no one's imagination is the exact same. Everyone has got their own different interpretation of what the book should be like.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
Yeah. I suppose it's that whole thing that we said of actually you can read it so many times and still get a different imagination of kind of how that scene would look.
Yes.
And there's definitely one scene that I can't wait to get onto that is my biggest gripe within the series.
Dare I ask?
It'll be a long time coming. It's in Deathly Hallows.
God, a while.
So quite a while before we get onto that. But it's probably one of my biggest gripes with the adaptations.
Okay.
But I think actually, if I could then change anything about this chapter in particular, I probably wouldn't change that much.
Yeah.
I think I would change what they did with the movies. I'd absolutely include more of the Muggle kind of world.
Yeah.
Because in all of the films, not just in Philosopher's Stone, you don't get enough of that transition from the boring mundaneness of Muggle life and being swept away to the Wizarding world.
Yeah.
As you do in the books.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, if you could change anything, would you change anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I honestly don't think so. I think it's just perfect.
Keep it as it is.
Pretty much. Why fix something that's not broken?
Exactly. It's the perfect introduction to the book, to the series. It just... You know where you're at with it.
Exactly.
It gradually brings you into it. It's not too intense. It's not overloading you with information. But it gives you enough that you want to read more.
Yeah.
I think it's the perfect first chapter.
I agree.
So, what was your kind of standout part?
Well, the arrival of Harry at the Dursleys. I mean, like, key pivotal moment. It's when the boy who lived is introduced. The boy who started it all, the boy who ended it all.
Negatives?
I just wish we'd seen more cloaks in the films. That's it.
True.
That's it. That's the only gripe I have.
Have more flamboyancy.
Yeah, I wanted high camp.
Yeah.
High camp as it was written.
Especially when it came out in like early 2000s, really could have gone for it.
Absolutely.
But I think for me, the kind of most standout bit would have been probably having the breadcrumbs and actually that enjoyment of being able to reread it.
Yeah.
And knowing what those breadcrumbs lead on to.
100%.
Things like the envelope that Dumbledore gives and lays on top of Harry. The hints to the bike, what's happened, all of those things just, for me, make the chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And negative-wise, I think it could have just been a bit more balanced. I think if you're going to have someone like Dumbledore come in and be this big character, he's got to have the best entrance.
Yeah.
And for him to just kind of... But at the same time, it's the kind of quintessential thing of Dumbledore just not showing off. Like, he is just that person who is just kind of cool and just above everyone, can just walk in and doesn't need anything else, can just walk in.
Yes.
I think actually that sums up first chapter quite nicely. It's a nice warm welcome. You walk into it and you are just absorbing all of this information.
Exactly. It's a fab chapter.
It is definitely worth the read, and actually the rereading of it is just
magical.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening to our first chapter of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, The Boy Who Lived, and the very first episode of the Wizarding Wireless Network podcast.
Woohoo! Join us next week when we will be discussing all things Dursleys.
So tune in next time and keep your radios switched on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.